Hey y'all, my name's Mare. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my August reading wrap-up. I'm so excited to share the 11 books that I read last month with y'all. I feel like I had a really great reading month. I didn't really have any books that I really disliked. I had one book that didn't really work for me, but everything else I enjoyed. So I'm really excited to talk to you about them. We're going to do this wrap up a little bit differently than I have in the past. We're gonna go sort of in order of books that I liked the least to books I liked the most. So we're gonna start off with the worst of the bunch, but the good news is there's only really one book that I didn't like this month, and that is, unfortunately, The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Now, this book was actually not that bad. The Dead Romantics follows Florence Day, who's a ghostwriter for a really popular romance author. Think Nora Roberts level. Like, she's ghostwriting for someone really important in the writing world. Not only is she a ghostwriter, but she can actually see and talk to ghosts. So this caused her a lot of issues when she was younger. She solved a murder because she actually talked to a boy who was a ghost, and he told her where to find his body, and it's just given her a lot of grief in the past of her own whole town, so she hasn't gone back home in a long time. But unfortunately, she gets news that her father has passed away, so Florence has to return home. Right before she returns home for her father's funeral, she's talking to her editor and is like, hey, I really need an extension for this book. It's not done yet. And her new editor, his name's Benji. Of course, he's really hot and Florence is really into him. So when she goes home, she didn't get her extension, but obviously there's other circumstances going on now. She finds him at her door as a ghost. So that causes all sorts of problems. So this book sounded really interesting to me. I didn't really realize there was this whole ghost component to it when I picked it up. I didn't dislike that aspect of the story, but I feel like there was just a whole lot going on in this book, because you have the ghost writing element, you have the ghost element, and then you have the grief element. I really liked what this author had to say about grief. This family actually owns a funeral home, and they're very uplifting about life and celebrating life and people who have passed, not reflecting on the bad times with them, but more so just celebrating everything that they shared together when they were alive. And I really enjoyed that component, but unfortunately this was marketed as a romance, so I was really expecting really great romance, and the chemistry was just not there with Benji and Florence for me, so that's why this book just didn't work out for me. I have a reading vlog where I talk a little bit more in depth about it. If you want to watch that, I'll link it down below, as well as any other reading vlogs that I have books for this month mentioned in. But the main reason The Dead Romantics didn't work for me was there was just too much going on, and the romance unfortunately suffered as a consequence. So I gave this one 2 stars, but it wasn't like an oh my god I hate this book 2 stars. It was just like, wow, this is really disappointing because I was really liking where this was going and it didn't end up well. The second book that I liked the least this month, this is kind of a weird way to do my wrap up, is The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren. I don't even remember the main characters' names anymore, but they work for this Chip and Joanna like couple, and they have to basically promote this couple to America as like the super fun loving, caring, they love each other couple, and they're not it. They're cheating on each other, they have a lot of fights and arguments, they somehow fall for each other in the process of all that. So I gave this one a 3.5 star rating, but it's honestly really forgettable to me, so if you want more of my thoughts, go watch that vlog I was talking about. But yeah, I liked this one. I think I would give another Christina Lauren a chance. The romance was sweet. I thought the plot was interesting, but it was nothing to remember. And that's clearly proven because I can't remember much about this book. The next book that I want to talk about is Crying in H-Mart, and this is a memoir by Michelle Zauner as she grows up Korean American and also loses her mother. So this one talks a lot about identity and mother-daughter relationships, and it had a lot of important things to say, and I did enjoy this one. It's hard to say like I enjoyed this memoir because it talks about a lot of terrible and horrible things that happened in Michelle Zauner's life, but I feel like she talks about a lot of things in a mother-daughter relationship that a lot of people can relate to. You know, she grew up and she had this very strange relationship to her mother, but when she was losing her, you know, it was all that she wanted to do was spend time with her mother, and like she couldn't cope with the fact that her mother was unfortunately dying. I thought this one was really emotional. I had a little bit of trouble connecting to the writing style because it was very metaphorical and lyrical, but also straight to the point sometimes. So I didn't love the writing style, but I thought that the way Michelle Zauner wrote was very emotional, and you could see how much she struggled with losing her mother. One thing I did really like about the writing style was how she connected a lot of things to cooking and to food, and you could see that that was something her mother loved to do, and so she wanted to pass it on to her daughter, and seeing her kind of grow into that and learn to cook for her mother was just something that I thought was really beautiful. Next, I read Late to the Party, which is a young adult contemporary novel. It's very coming of age, and I gave this one a 4-star rating, but I honestly really struggled with my rating of this book because it's very young adult, and I am now 23. I turned 23 last month, and I am struggling to connect to young adult literature like I used to, and this has been an ongoing problem for me. I just think that it's hard to relate to those messages and themes when they're not meant for you anymore, and that doesn't necessarily mean I can't read YA, but it's hard for me to look at it through a critical lens because I am not that age, and I don't have the right to comment on how these characters are acting if I am not that age. So my main issue with Late to the Party was how the characters were acting, and I thought that their actions were a little bit immature, but when I was thinking about it, I was like, no, these characters aren't acting immature because they're acting their age. They're 17. Of course they're gonna act like this, and they're gonna have drama and lots of petty things that are like hurtful to them. So I kind of took a step back and I was like, you know, I can't really be mad at them because they're just acting like kids. But it definitely tarnished my enjoyment a little bit of it just because it wasn't a book that was meant for me at my age, and that's okay. But I still feel like I learned a lot from this book, and I definitely recommend it to younger readers who are looking for a coming of age story. So this one follows Cody Teller. She's 17 and she's never been kissed, and her 2 other friends and her are kind of making this their mission this summer. They're like, we want to get kissed by the end of summer. We want to find love and be in real relationships. They have this opportunity to crash this party one night, and Cody's like, I'm not gonna go, y'all going without me. One of her friends calls her and is like, hey, we're too drunk to drive, can you please come pick us up? So she goes, and while she's on her way to come pick them up, she actually sees a boy from her high school kissing another boy, and she's been told like, oh, please don't tell anyone, and she's then taken under this guy's wing and taken into their friend group. So it definitely talks a lot about just finding yourself and trying new things and falling in love for the first time, and I thought it was really sweet. But again, for me, it was just like I couldn't connect to the characters as much as I wanted to. So if you're a young adult and you like young adult contemporary, this one's an awesome recommendation. I would really, really recommend it to you. Next, I have Fireborne, and this one I gave a 3.5-star rating. Fireborne follows Lee and Annie, and they're both dragon riders for this government that usurped the previous government because it was bad. They're now finding there's issues with this current government system because it's still bad and corrupt. And so Lee and Annie are competing to be first rider for their government. They're wanting to be the main dragon rider of them all, and they're up head to head with each other, but they also grew up together, so there's like this really deep emotional connection between the 2 of them. I don't like know how to explain this to you plot wise because that's pretty much all that happens in the first half of this book. Is there's this competition to be first rider, and then I feel like when the competition actually happened, it was very lackluster, and I didn't even know what was happening until halfway through when it was almost over. I liked this book. I liked it enough to consider picking up the sequel because I feel like the last 200 pages got really interesting. The first 200 pages of this book really dragged for me, and part of that I feel is that I haven't read a lot of young adult fantasy lately, but I also feel like this book was just very slow moving and it lacked a lot of detail. I feel like this concept is really cool. I feel like there's a lot of really cool elements to Fireborne that were just not really explained. Like, I didn't have a good grasp on the world. I understood the class system and why they were competing and all of that, but I didn't really get a good understanding of what the world looked like, and I didn't really understand the whole dragon riding concept because I feel like there's just so much more they could have done with it. And yes, this is a series, it probably will continue on, but like I said, I didn't even know that the first rider competition was happening until it was halfway over, so I feel like it just needed a little bit more detail and a little bit more plot development for me to have fully been invested in this, and that was like a big problem that I had. If you like action-packed books and you like YA fantasy, I feel like you'll enjoy this, but know that it has a slow start, and know you're probably gonna want a little bit more detail, because if you're someone like me, I want someone to paint a pretty picture, and I didn't feel like the picture was properly painted. Next, I read a romance book series, and I liked them more as the series went on. So that's gonna be The Friend Zone, The Happy Ever After Playlist, and Life's Too Short. I'm not gonna go too into detail into the first two books because I did a whole reading vlog, and you can watch that if you want my full-fledged thoughts, but I'll talk kind of like about the series as a whole, and I'll talk about the third book in more detail because I haven't shared my thoughts and opinions on it yet. But I read the Friend Zone series, and this follows 3 different women finding love who also have a lot going on in their lives. So I really appreciate that this author implements real-world issues into her main characters. For instance, The Friend Zone, the main character in that book, Kristen, deals with infertility and the fact that she'll never be able to have kids on her own. And the second book follows Sloane, who lost her fiance right before her wedding, and she's finding love again. And the third book follows Vanessa, who is a very popular YouTuber vlogger because she's spreading awareness of ALS, which is a really horrible and devastating muscular disease, and she's basically lived with this knowledge her entire life that she might have it because it runs in her family, and it's a really horrible thing to think about. So all 3 of these books just had different real life things that women struggle with all the time, and that is never really portrayed on paper, or it's not in contemporary popular published literature. I had never read about women dealing with any of these issues in literature, so that's why I really appreciated that the author included those in her works. But specifically with the first and the third book in this series, I'm not going to give anything away, but I felt like those issues that those women dealt with were almost invalidated to a point by the conclusion of the books, so I would definitely take caution with that. I feel like with the first book, it definitely tarnished a lot of that book for me, more so than in the third book, because I realized that the resolution was not like conclusive. It was definitely left open-ended. It's hard to like talk about without spoiling, but I just didn't like that these problems were given and these issues were given, and it's really important to shine a light to those issues, but then how the book ended kind of invalidated a lot of the messages surrounding those issues. So kind of proceed with caution with these. I did really enjoy this series as a whole, and I will read anything and everything that this author publishes because I've enjoyed all 4 of her books that I've read. But yeah, that was kind of an issue that I had. So the first book follows Kristen, who struggles with infertility, and she's dating this guy overseas, and basically they break up. She starts dating Sloane's fiance's best man for the wedding, Josh, and they fall in love maybe, but then they can't date because Kristen doesn't want to tell him that she can never have kids, and also she's kind of in a relationship already, but then they break it off, so it's okay, right? So that's what the first one's about, and like I said just a minute ago, that was my main issue, was just like how it ended, and it felt very invalidating to me, but I really liked the chemistry between the 2 main characters. And then the second book I liked a lot until the third act conflict. It wasn't necessarily the resolution of the book that really irritated me, because I feel like that whole issue of like Sloane dealing with the grief of her fiance dying and how her new partner treated her because of that, like I thought that was actually really well handled, and I appreciated that the main male love interest was so sympathetic and understanding towards that situation. And there was never like a question of jealousy or anything like that. It was more so just like making sure that she was okay and she was well cared for. My main issue with the second book was that the third act conflict felt very over the top for me. I didn't like how the male of interest responded to Sloane's like insecurities and doubts and things like that. It was resolved very quickly and he was very apologetic towards it, but I didn't like it. And it sort of made sense because the main male love interest in this book is a famous individual. He's a very popular musician, and so there's a lot of specific problems that'll come with that. But yeah, I didn't like how he responded to the main conflict. But the Happy Ever playlist follows Sloane dealing with the grief of her fiance dying and navigating love again with a very popular musician, Jackson Waters, because she actually steals his dog on accident. The dog runs in front of her car. She tries calling the owner and being like, hey, like I have your dog, come get him. But then he never does because he's overseas with no cell service. So that's kind of why they meet. They start talking over that incident. I thought it was really cute. I thought it was like a really good meet cute. And then the third book follows Vanessa, and she may or may not have ALS. And this is a horrible disease. You know it's happening to you and there's nothing you can do about it, basically, because all of the treatments, they don't have a cure. And it was just horrible to read about. I really appreciated that the author included a disease like this because I had never, again, read anything like it, but it was really devastating to read about. And I really liked Vanessa's outlook on life because the title of the book's Life's Too Short, and she truly believes this, and it's very much modeled in her day-to-day behavior. She wants to live every day to her fullest, and I just really liked that was a message that was continuously shown and it was never invalidated. I think she really tried to bring that message home, in that you should live every day like it's your last, and I really liked that. This book is really heavy. It not only deals with ALS and the main character having to face the possibility that she might have that, but it also deals with a sister who has a severe drug addiction. She actually had a child and she dropped it off on Vanessa's front door, basically, and now Vanessa's taking care of the child. And it also deals with just a lot of like different kinds of addiction and family issues, and I thought it was just really beautifully done. I gave this one a 4.5-star rating because, again, that freaking ending kind of irritated me, but also it didn't. Like, it didn't. But this one was definitely by far my favorite of the series. It was definitely the heaviest, in my opinion, just because it had so many different heavy elements to it. All the books are heavy, but this one in particular had a lot of different issues that were highlighted and brought to the forefront of the novel. I definitely recommend it, but know that it's going to be an emotional roller coaster. The next book I want to talk about is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy, and this one has been all over booktube, bookstagram, everywhere I look I feel like I'm seeing this book, so I knew I wanted to read it because I didn't even realize Jennette McCurdy was coming out with a memoir. And she was a child actress who very much did not want to be in acting. Her mother forced that upon her, and it caused all sorts of issues in her life. She had a really strained relationship with her mother. It was very complicated. She had a strained relationship with eating and just acting and everything, and like it was really horrible, like just to read about. I felt really horrible for her. Her experiences and how she described them were just really heartbreaking, and I thought it was a really well written memoir. I listened to the audiobook and it's narrated by Jennette herself, so I highly recommend listening to it if you can. It was really heartbreaking, and I thought it was really well written and well crafted. I don't really have much to say on it, but I'm really glad I read it. I feel like I learned a lot about Jennette McCurdy, and I just feel as if she writes in a very powerful and poetic way. Like, I truly feel that the terse writing style left you with just so much empathy, and I just felt really connected to all of her experiences and everything that she went through. I felt like I was right there experiencing them with her, and I know I could never know everything and all the horrors she went through, but the way she wrote the memoir, it really makes you feel connected to her and just feel heartbreak all at once. So honestly, a really fantastic memoir. I highly recommend it. So I know I said I was talking about these in like worst to best order, but I think my top 3 of the month are definitely Life's Too Short, I'm Glad My Mom Died, and the last book that I'm going to be talking about. But I wanted to kind of talk about the Friend Zone series collectively, so that's why it kind of got out of order. I'm going to mention one more book, which is honorable mention, I guess, for one of my best books of the month. This order thing didn't go well for me, but I really enjoyed most of the books that I read this month, is the point. So anyways, well met. This was a romance that I really enjoyed. This one follows Simon and Emily, who are part of a Renaissance fair together. Emily is in town helping be a caretaker for her sister and for her niece because her sister was involved in a car accident and she's not able to have as much mobility as she used to. She needs help with taking care of her niece, and her niece really wants to participate in this Renaissance fair, but in order for her to do so, Emily has to volunteer for the festival. And this festival is run by Simon, who is very like stone cold towards Emily. She very much thinks that he doesn't like her, and of course they find a relationship with each other. I liked this one a lot. I did think Simon was a little bit harsh towards Emily at times, but I definitely understood his reasoning, and I thought that the relationship that formed out of it was really romantic and beautiful, and I just loved the setting of this. I thought it was so fun to have the relationship blossom at a Renaissance fair. Like, what a fun setting for a romance book. I thought the ending was a little bit rushed, but beyond that, I thought the pacing was awesome. I liked the romance, I liked the plot. Like, I don't have much to say, I just had a really good time with this one. And lastly, we're getting to my favorite book of the month, which I can say without a doubt was Love List and Fancy Ships. And I wish I had the opportunity to actually vlog this one and share my thoughts as I went along with the book, but I actually read it all in one sitting while I was not at home. So I didn't have my camera, I didn't have any way to share my thoughts on this book, but I devoured it. I was so engrossed in this book. I didn't want to put it down to the point where I checked out the audiobook and was listening to it when I couldn't be physically reading it, because I wanted to get this book consumed as fast as possible. This book was heartbreaking, devastating, but so funny, so romantic. It was the absolute perfect combination of women's fiction and romance for me. I'm finding that I really like a good blend of trauma but also romance. Like, I'm really loving seeing women come into themselves and find not only love but an appreciation for themselves, and I just feel like Love List and Fancy Ships did this so beautifully. So this one follows Jo, who works on a yacht as sort of a like server, bartender. She's a stewardess. She does a lot on the ship, and Jo has a list of 30 things she wants to do before she's 30, and her 30th birthday is coming up. But unfortunately, her list has been put on hold because there was a really traumatic incident that happened to her and her family. Her nephew unfortunately got into a bike accident and he was killed. It stopped her from wanting to do anything because she's just so grief-stricken. Fast forward a couple months, her nieces, who always came to visit her every summer with her nephew, come up unannounced to stay with her for the summer like they usually do, but there was miscommunication between their mother and Jo, and she didn't know that they were coming at all. So Jo's plans unfortunately have to take a hit. She was going to go to Europe. She was going to try and do the things on her list and push through, but it can't happen because her nieces are in town, and she's so grateful to have her nieces in town. The nieces being with her were such a wonderful and fun element. I really enjoyed seeing the family dynamics between the three of them. The nieces find out about her list and decide to help her complete it anyways. And one thing on this list is that she has to kiss a hot random guy at a bar, or she has to go to Europe. So they find fun ways to complete all of these things on the list while her nieces are in town, and she starts off with a bang with kiss a hot guy at a bar. She meets Alex, and he later ends up being not only her neighbor but also the new cook on the yacht. So it was just so sweet. There was a Zac Efron-a-thon in this book. It was so cute and fun. I just really loved the relationship between the nieces and Jo. I loved Jo's relationship with her best friend Nina, and there's actually a sequel about Nina finding love, so I'm hoping to read that this month. And I just really loved how Alex and Jo were together. This book was just everything I could ever want in a book, in a romance novel, in literally anything. It was so sweet, so precious, and it also had a lot to say about grief and overcoming it, and how to sit with that grief but also to live and to continue living your life. So I loved it so much. I really recommend it to anyone who likes Emily Henry books or likes romance that have really hard-hitting themes to it. This is everything that I could ever want in a book, and I think you'll really enjoy it if you like romances with hard-hitting messages. So definitely my favorite of the month, and probably one of my favorites of the whole year. I can't wait to read the sequel. I'm so excited. But yeah, those are the 11 books that I read during August. I had a wonderful month. Let me know what your favorite books of the month were, what your least favorite books of the month were. Let's chat in the comments about everything and anything during the month of August. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye y'all!